Lord Jesus Christ. We've just read two of the shortest books in the Bible. Each one of them fewer than 15 verses in the versification that was put to the scriptures much later. But the central message of these two short books is as powerful in the 21st century as it was 2,000 years ago. Each letter, if handwritten like the originals, would fill a standard sheet of papyrus as it was used in John's day, very similar to our A4 sheets. It's possible that 2nd John was written in code. And that tells us something about the ecclesial world at that time. One of the things to notice about these letters is that they make no reference to pressures and dangers from the outside, from those who have persecuted the believers, for example, as in other places that we read. In other words, John is saying all the problems that the ecclesial world faces in his day are within the ecclesias themselves. Some commentators believe that 2nd John, at least, was written in code, as it were. The elect lady and her children, they say, may be a reference to an ecclesia. So why would he do that? Because if this letter fell into the wrong hands, it might be destroyed. That's the kind of difficulties that the ecclesial world faced, a time when ill feeling and suspicion divided the community which called themselves Christian. They were separated in beliefs, in practice, and in teaching. And that's something which is familiar to us in our day. Some commentators believe that the reference at the start of the letter, John the Elder, is not a title, but just a description. In other words, it just means old John, just as the Apostle Paul in his letter to Philemon refers to himself as Paul the Aged. But the third letter, in other words, the second that we're considering today, is addressed to Gaius the Elder in verse 1. So it may be a title after all, in the same way that in our ecclesial arrangements, we have titles. We have arranging brethren, we have recording brethren. So it may be a title of that kind. But as the third letter says and reveals to us, it was a time when those who taught that there were those who taught that Jesus did not come in the flesh. And they were persuading others to accept this understanding, making themselves, in the words of the apostle, deceivers and the Antichrist. John did not want his readers to be misled by this heresy. As he wrote in 2nd John verse 8, be careful that you do not lose what you have worked for. Rather, be careful that you may be rewarded for your faith. Some of these quotations that I have noted here, I have taken from the New International Version, which is very helpful in clarifying things which are not always clear in Jacobean English. Verse 9 continues, anyone who runs ahead and does not continue in the teaching of Christ does not have God or God's approval, but whoever continues in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. John goes on, if anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not take them into your house or welcome them. Anyone who welcomes them shares in their wicked work. I have much to write to you, says John, but I do not want to use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to visit you and talk with you face to face, so that our joy may be complete. He concludes in verse 13, the children of your sister who is chosen by God send their greetings. And that too may be a way of disguising that letter if it fell into the hands of those who opposed what John was trying to achieve. So it's very clear that the ecclesial world in the day that these were written was seriously divided. There's no evidence in either of the letters that believers at that time had to face external persecution. The ecclesia's problems were all internal. There were strong-willed leaders who used their authority to silence people of whom they disapproved. As the next letter, John 3, 3rd John, makes very clear. John's third letter is addressed to a brother named Gaius, who's also described, as I mentioned earlier, as an elder, so probably had some kind of responsibility for leadership in the ecclesia there. And John's concern was that some brethren were finding fault with one another and building up followings in the meeting. The real problem was opposing factions within the ecclesia. And the truth of it was, we can conclude that many of the brothers and sisters who were caught up in these disagreements had lost sight of the agape law. Their master, during his crucifixion, had prayed, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. It's easy to forget that prayer when we have disagreements with brothers and sisters. About 50 years ago, I was offered a post at a school not far from here, which was connected with the Methodist Church. Some of my brothers disapproved of my decision to take the post, but they didn't tell me. They told each other. That's not the way to solve a problem for disciples of Christ. But in the fullness of time, it happened that I began to discuss the Bible with one of my colleagues at the school. And those discussions ended in 2 baptisms in this ecclesia. And my colleague and his wife are still members of this ecclesia. Eventually, we were able to see the hand of God at work, but it took time. Sometimes we can be too impatient. We can allow our limited vision to fill the whole screen. And that is the message of John's 3rd letter. The letter is addressed to a brother named Gaius, described by John as a dear friend in the truth. John prays for this brother's physical and his spiritual health. He describes him as one who is faithful to truth and who walks in truth. But there was a problem in this ecclesia. A brother named Diotrephes loves to be first. He will have nothing to do with John and gossips maliciously against him. He refuses to welcome the brothers with John and wants to disfellowship from the congregation anyone who disagrees with him. John appeals to Gaius not to be influenced by this man. Anyone who does good, he writes, comes from God. But anyone who has selfish and evil ambitions does not understand God at all. There is, however, another brother in the meeting, Demetrius, who is well spoken of all who know him, by all who know him. John too approves of him and urges Gaius to support him. John concludes by writing that he has much to convey to Gaius, but he does not want to do it with pen and ink. He hopes to see Gaius soon so that they can speak face to face. He concludes with a prayer for peace for Gaius. He passes on the greetings of his friends and asks Gaius to greet his friends by name. Again, this is an ecclesia not facing persecution, but one which is plagued by internal divisions. Too many of them had lost sight of the agape law, of the words of their master, recorded by the Apostle Luke in chapter 23 of his gospel. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing. This is a lesson I must learn as I reflect on these things. And perhaps, my brother, my sister, you need to learn it as well. May our loving Heavenly Father be with us, each one, as we go into a new week of discipleship. Amen.